Hey, ladies, welcome back to the Vibrant Flow podcast. I am, again, so excited to have a wonderful conversation with an amazing woman. And today we're talking to Anna Kolak, and she has been a gift to me. Her presence in my life recently has been a gift, and I'm so excited to talk to her more about transforming your life and feeling good in your life. And how she introduces herself is I'm taking this actually from her podcast introduction, which is so cool. I wanted to use it in this introduction as well, because I think it really just touches on some valuable points here. And what she says is, what's on the other side of success? After you have the job, business, wealth, family, trophies, body, fame, impact, legacy, time, then what? There might be some prancing unicorns at the end of the rainbow, but what if something is still missing? What if everything that got you there doesn't work so well anymore? What does it actually take to feel good in your life? So Anna Kolak is an executive coach, experienced designer, management consultant, trained in neuropsychology, behavior change, and architecture. She's also a retired or recovered superhuman who used to believe that the key to success and happiness was willingly doing all the hard things, pushing, holding yourself to the fire relentlessly and with endless endurance. It turns out, though, things don't have to be hard to be worthwhile. Most suffering is counterproductive. Happiness and meaning and impact aren't waiting on some mountaintop in the distance at the finish line of just one more ultramarathon, a 70-hour work week, or an unfulfilling career, or a life lived in the hopes of pleasing or helping or changing others. It turns out that doing hard things will get you far, but you'll need something altogether different to experience the next level. What it actually takes to feel good in your life is surprisingly simple, though not always easy. And Anna has a podcast called The Naked Art of Living, which I highly recommend, where she's talking to amazing people whose authenticity and courage will inspire you for sure. And she's uncovering the first principles of a life well lived, accessible to everyone. And she's guiding you through simple and powerful practices that will transform how you feel in your life and the impact you have in this world. And what she says last is, let's explore the blue ocean of life beyond success. You are invited to leave your armor at the dock. I'll do the same. Let's jump in together. So good to have you here, Anna. How are you feeling?
I'm good. It's interesting hearing that read to me. You know, it's like one of my first thoughts is like, wow, that's good. That sounds cool. Who wrote that? Yeah. And it's interesting how things happen in waves, so like, I don't know, we're never really done.
So true.
I've come so far, in a lot of the things that I wrote about in there that you just read back, but like they just keep coming. All the old stuff, it kind of keeps coming.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Peeling an onion, or
I know, and I love that image of waves. I actually have this. It's not a painting. It's like this very minimalistic drawing that I have framed on my wall that says that healing comes in waves, and it's something that speaks to me a lot, like throughout my experience of healing from chronic pain and all of the things that relate to that, anxiety and everything. So it does
I love that.
resonate with me a lot. So it's been so cool. Like we connected over on Instagram. Like that's the place where I usually connect with my guests. But I just wanted to tell my listeners like how amazing it was. Like you were just offering your time for me when I was dealing with something physically. It was gastritis at the time, and then we connected over a call, and it was just I mean, it was a gift. I loved having that time with you and your insights, and it also inspired me to ask you to come on the podcast, because the things that we talked about with like transforming your relationship with different areas of your life. We were talking about my relationship with food and how I relate to eating, and it was transformative. I've been applying the insights that I gathered from that moment that we had together ever since. And I really wanted to have this deep dive conversation with you. What led you to this work? And for example, what have been some of the biggest paradigm shifts, some of the biggest shifts in your life?
Um, I guess honestly, what led me to this work is my own life, the way I grew up. Like, I don't know, maybe the older I get, the more I can appreciate it about it. And I don't blame my parents. I don't blame anyone. I think, they did the best they could. But I didn't have a great childhood. There were a lot of really like, I don't even know that I have the right perspective on quite how intense some of the trauma was. It was like
Mm.
not great. And I knew from a very young age, I think some people grow up that way and they don't realize, they just think like, oh, that's how the world is. I knew that something was wrong from a very young age. When I read really early, I didn't have friends till I was older. And so books were my friends. And my mom is very, I guess I'd call her like an intellectual. And she loved books. And so there were always all kinds of books all around the house. And I started reading encyclopedias because I read through everything by, probably kindergarten age or first grade or something. And she had medical books laying around and psychology books. And I remember reading those, and I would start like diagnosing people, which they didn't like very much, but accurately, and so like from a very young age, I knew I felt like something was wrong. And I had this sense that like, and this is actually a big paradigm shift that I had later in life. But for most of my life, I kind of thought like, there's something wrong with me. It's almost like I was raised by wolves, sort of, or like not even very nice wolves. Like I didn't learn a lot of things that people learn growing up. I had to teach myself everything because I didn't really have adults that were there guiding me. And so I always felt like there's something wrong with me. I've got to fix myself. I want to be normal, which, now is kind of funny. But, I want to be happy. I couldn't wait to grow up because when I grow up, I'll be around adults like that aren't crazy and that are normal and everything will be fine. That's not how it works when you grow up. But so I was really focused on improving. And so I did everything but that because I was taught, like if something is easy, it's worthless or it's not worthwhile. So I wanted to go to medical school, psychiatry or psychology, like something like that. Neuroscience, MD, PhD, and I didn't. I did something totally different. I went to architecture because it was harder kind of. But I always came back to this work. Everything I did in architecture, everything I did later in like a digital kind of career strategy and design and product, it was always about people and helping people suffer less, just like reducing like bullshit in our life, reducing suffering, just like unnecessary stuff that's not really helping us. And then, through various like very roundabout path, my career has many different careers in it. I wound up to be doing just this kind of work, like distilled down into, right, the form it takes now is mostly coaching.
Yeah.
So I'm working one-on-one with people or sometimes with, couples or groups or teams, like just about this stuff, getting to the root of things.
What do you feel like is getting in the way of getting to the root of things? Because we're so often we're wanting change, but we don't see like what's the problem behind the problem or the desire behind the desire. What do you feel like is getting in the way?
Yeah. So there's a few things I would say, like, I mean, the first thought that came to my mind was like, we're not really honest with ourselves, but that's not even really, when I say that out loud, that's not really it. I mean, sort of, that's the form it takes. But I think, and I mean, we could talk about it for days and years in kind of psychology terms and analyzing and whatever. Childhoods, difficult lives, like whatever. But I think what it really comes down to, what it's distilled down to, is a disconnection from ourselves, from our true selves. Um, and I don't know if humans have always been that way. I think probably more now than we used to be for various cultural reasons. It's also built into our culture, um, like disconnection from self.
Mm.
And so, an example of that is something I found myself doing to my kids. And then I was like, wait a minute, is like, well, you need to eat breakfast. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And just this thing that I had believed, and that sounds good. And you can read that in many places, and many, very well-intentioned people will say that. But I realized what I was teaching them was ignore your body cues, which is
Mm.
like the number one fundamental cause of any food related issues, period. Most health related issues is ignoring our body cues.
Yeah.
So that's one way it shows up. But, like just disconnecting from ourselves, like not even knowing what we really want, not even taking the time to like really be very, very, very crystal clear about like, what do I actually want? What do I love? What lights me up? What doesn't? Like, what sucks? And like,
Mm.
and then from that place, from that disconnection, you can see how like, I think everything happens. And then when you have a culture or different cultural values attached to that, then it just reinforces it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The body cues one is such a huge one, and we talked about it together last time we were talking about like eating habits and my relationship with food, because at the time I was like, I had the gastritis thing, and it's like a pain that you get after eating and not being able to eat because of it, and the like acidity levels of your stomach and whatnot. But what lay like behind that, like what we touched upon was this long-term tendency that I've had, or a desire to control, right? And I
Mhm.
mentioned to you last time that I've had this tendency to be fully something or not at all, or like going extremely
Mhm.
into like one thought, one like way of approaching something, food in this case, or and then having days where I'm like going crazy, like eating whatever,
Mhm.
and then feeling crappy about that because I feel like, okay, now I have my free day, so I'm eating everything,
Mhm.
like and not listening to my body. Even like it's like with both extremes, you're not listening to your body. That's
Mhm.
what it is. So that was such a huge thing. And I would like to ask, like in your experience with yourself and with your clients, where does like especially women, because we're now talking to mostly women, do you feel like this is something that you see prevalent, like is prevalent in today's day and age, this lack of intimacy with your body cues, and then having this really weird relationship with food?
Yes. I mean, short answer, yes, absolutely. I don't know, it's maybe, like I would call almost like an epidemic, a pandemic, sort of. I mean, I don't know that I've really met that many people who don't have that going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually interesting. I was thinking about this after we talked. You're a rare person that I've met, and you still have stuff, right? But you're someone that's closer to that connection than most people that I know, um, or that I've met in life. It's just not, or maybe it's the people I know or the types of circles I travel in or whatever, but it's not part of kind of mainstream culture,
Yeah.
really. And it's a big thing, no matter what my clients come to me for. And I've got people from like all different situations, like executives at like top company, global, like international pharmaceutical companies and, oil companies and all, Google and whatever they're coming to me for in coaching, this is always something that we touch on. Like, I don't touch on it just because I think you always should. It's not a rule, but it's fundamental. It's fundamental to like creating whatever you want to create in your life, but then also like enjoying yourself and feeling more ease, sort of, it's like lubrication on a hinge or something. When you don't have that, or gears on a bicycle, you can still push the bicycle, but it's really hard and really unpleasant, and you can't go as quickly.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly.
And so, food in particular, I would say, like, that's a really interesting, it's a really cool place for coaching and kind of self-work, because like it's interesting. You can work on almost anything in your life with food, because it's so fundamental to like our survival, and also to pleasure and to knowing ourselves, to hearing our body, to hearing ourselves, to like, like emotional eating is a big thing, like where and that is also related to not necessarily being super in touch with how we're feeling in the moment, or to being afraid of our feelings, and our thoughts. And so food, like, I mean, you could, like, if you only worked on your relationship with food and eating and nourishment, like, that would change everything in life.
Wow. So it's interesting that the term emotional eating is somehow also bypassing what you're actually feeling.
Yes.
That process is a form of bypass, which is
weird. I'm curious, why do you say that? Or what are you seeing?
Like, if you say emotional eating, and then I'm eating because I'm sad, I'm eating, stuffing my mouth with chocolate because I have a disappointment, or I'm in some way trying to bypass what I'm actually feeling, or the pain at the core is something that I want to avoid. So it's a way of numbing or avoiding what is actually happening. So I just think it's interesting that we call it emotional eating, because like it's driven by this intense emotion, but we are actually ignoring the emotion or the feeling and the cue.
That's a key, because so when I first heard about that, well, actually, it's funny. A few years ago, I started working with like a friend, colleague of mine, someone I met in a coach training, around food, because I became really interested in like that aspect of coaching, and she was certified in it, and and I was like, I could probably use some help. And she talked about emotional eating, and I remember she talked about how she realized she had that issue when she did this coaching, like in her part of her training. And I remember thinking, I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, wow, like that must suck for you. Like, I know people have that issue. I'm so glad I don't. And lo and behold, I really, really did. But I was so disconnected from myself. Like, it's not like I was like, oh, I'm so sad, I'm going to go eat a box of, or, ice cream, like I know people do. I didn't even know what I was feeling. I was so disconnected from myself. I didn't even know I was having feelings. And then I would just go, and it was like, it had become so automatic, that I didn't even know what I was doing. And so then I was like, through various things, as I was coaching with her, I realized that, and I started working on it. And my first thought, one of my first thoughts was like, okay, no emotional eating, bad. You only eat when you're hungry, and that's it. Which I think you talked about extremes, like all or nothing. I have that tendency too. So I wouldn't say emotional eating is bad. I don't think any of this stuff is good or bad. The thing that can get really tricky, though, is when we're doing something that comes from disconnection with our true self, when it's not intentional. Not that it's wrong or bad, but like, emotional eating is not on its own bad. Like, I might want to just be eating because I'm with, friends, and it's this like lovely sort of experience. And maybe I'm not hungry really, but like, a few bites of something, it's maybe just part of this beautiful, wonderful experience. Or maybe I'm really sad. I might be aware of that. And like, piece of chocolate, like I would just really feel better with this delicious piece of chocolate, and I'm not super hungry, but I want that. And the key there is really being able to tell the difference between like our true self, a true kind of wanting, versus this sort of impulsive, compulsive, sometimes it feels manic for some people. Like, oh yeah, I want that, like sort of like how you described on your off days.
Yeah. Exactly. So
That
you're
it's not
not
that that's
present.
bad. Yeah, it's not that it's bad or wrong or whatever. It's just it's coming from a disconnection from
Yeah.
self. And so then the more you feed that, the more you feed disconnection from self. And that
Yeah.
causes all kinds of tricky things.
Yeah, exactly. And the feeling is that you're not present in
Mm-hmm.
that moment. You're not present with your body or your
Right.
emotional being. It's just you're like doing something like
Yes.
like an automatic motion almost.
Yes. You're
And
not even present with the food.
yeah.
That's the thing too. Like usually you're not even present with the food. Like, being present with food is like a very meditative experience. It's like taking a bite, slowly being aware of like, okay, this is how this is tasting. And, like it usually only takes genuinely a few bites of something experience that way for you to feel satisfied. Um,
Mm.
so it's not even being present to the food. Like you're not even really getting the pleasure or joy or whatever you're trying to get. It's not even really fixing your need or filling your need
Yeah,
when you do it that way without presence.
exactly. So the essential awareness is completely lacking. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not there if you're doing it from this place of disconnection. And
Yeah.
that's something that we discussed last time also, is like how this connects with pleasure and your essential awareness, your sensory awareness, and being grounded in your five senses,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're eating. How do you feel like, or have you experienced it yourself, the shift, and what does it feel like? That's what I'm curious to know. What does it feel like, in your own words, to approach eating or anything in life from this place of connection, sensual awareness, and presence, rather than from that place of disconnection? Because
Yeah.
we're always looking for that felt sense of difference.
Well, and I'll be honest, like I haven't solved this for myself. Like I have years, decades of 4 decades of conditioning, which I'm not blaming anyone for that. That's just how our brains work. We're conditioned to things. I have a lot of conditioning to the opposite of this experience,
Yeah,
and
most of us
all,
have.
yeah,
Yeah.
and lots of tendencies, like I'm a hyper perfectionist and all or nothing and very self-critical. And our culture, which again, like I don't put blame on the culture. That's just something that humans do. Like cultures develop, and the way it's developed, it's completely in opposition to this sort of like slow in the moment presence. And the way our lives go, it's like everything, all the forces are in opposition to this, so it makes it hard. But the moments that I have had, and that comes in waves too. Sometimes it lasts longer. Right now I'm in a place in my life where I feel like I've gotten too far away from it. But when you do ride that wave, when you catch that wave, I mean, it's just like peace. It's
Mm,
peace and like giggling. It's sort of like what I imagine childhood could have been like for me. I didn't have much of that, but just like, I mean, it's very childlike in a way. It's just like it feels easier and happier and slower and better. It's flow.
mm,
Um, it's more real, I think, because then presence is also the realest thing that we can experience
yeah.
because it's here and now.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not always good. Like, you might eat something that you're like, oh my God, that's disgusting. I hate that. But still, that can be a really beautiful experience if you really, like, oh yeah, it's like really has this weird bitter taste that I don't like at all. And I feel it at the back of my mouth and on this part of my tongue. But that can also be an adventure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just wanted to say that it's really, really important that we can be honest about this and vulnerable. And I really thank you for saying that you're not like you haven't completely eviscerated
Yeah, crack the code.
the problem, quote unquote, because that's not also not what I've experienced thus far. Of
Mhm.
course, like I've experienced that shift in being and doing, but like you said, there are so many elements that go against this desire to slow down that
Mhm.
surround us all the time. And I do believe that part of that art of softness that I talk about, art of softness and surrender and peace and groundedness, is the ability to just, admit and say like, well, that's how it is right now, and that's
Mhm.
okay. And
And
it's not,
love ourselves through that.
yeah,
Like, that's a piece that I'm working on for myself, is like, I have it for other people, but for myself internally, like, I'm still not always very nice. It is, I'm a lot nicer than I used to be. But yeah, like, loving ourselves through these moments, um, where, we're not doing what we want to be doing or think we
mm,
should be doing.
yeah,
Forgiving ourselves.
exactly. Yeah, that is part of the liberation process.
Mhm.
So I feel like personally, at least for
Yes.
me, when I go into the loop and the cycle of judging myself for what I did, how I ate, or how I've approached something throughout the day, and that's just gonna keep me stuck and sort of I don't know, tethered
Mhm.
to that thing that I want to or desperately feel like I want to be released from. And so it is really important that we forgive
Mhm.
ourselves and love ourselves. So how do you feel like sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, you asked about paradigm shifts before. Here's like a really big one that for me, that's like been life changing, is sort of getting a new understanding of just how we work, like how human experience works. And one of the biggest things I've learned is to not, well, I guess, to understand what our thoughts are. And our feelings come from thoughts, whether we're aware of the connection or not. Like, that's just how it works neurologically. Um, to not be afraid of those, and so, like, part of what it is to human, like, we can't change this. This is part of the joy of humaning also, but is like, our thoughts create our entire experience.
Yeah.
I know, some people, it can be easy to kind of misinterpret that, like, and I don't, it, that doesn't mean that our thoughts literally create everything we see. And although you can make an argument for that in a way, like a very
Mm,
long roundabout argument, but
I
it
get
just,
what you're
it
saying. Yeah.
creates our experience in the moment. And our thought capacity is very, very powerful. Like, that's like creation stuff. um and like, sometimes it's really awesome and it feels wonderful and great, and a lot of the time, especially in our culture, it feels really terrible. It's when you get into like anxiety loops and self-criticism loops. Oh God, I shouldn't have eaten that. Now I feel terrible. Why did I do that to myself? I suck. Why can't I remember? Like, I should know better. For me, like, I coach people on this. What the hell is wrong with me?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
but those are just like, so I get into those spirals because, like, it's unavoidable because I'm human. That's part of how we work. That's where creation of things comes from. But is the remembering, being able to catch yourself and like, oh wait, that's what's happening. I'm like stuck in this movie in my head, and it's not even real.
Yeah.
It's not even real. And the thing about thoughts is, they create our experience. And so we could be thinking about something that happened in the past, so it's not real anymore, and we can get profound anxiety, a panic attack in the moment from those thoughts. Um, and so, like, that's something that a huge paradigm shift for me has been, understanding, like, oh, like, that's just this thing that goes on in my brain. It's
Yeah.
not me. It doesn't mean I'm terrible. It doesn't mean like I'm I have an anxiety disorder, although, you know, that can be a helpful paradigm for people sometimes, but it's just like, oh, it's just these thoughts. And I
Mm,
don't have to watch this movie right now
mm,
if I don't want to. I can
yeah,
leave the movie theater. I can go to a different movie.
yeah, exactly. You can change the channel.
You can change the channel. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, yeah, that's so true. And as someone who has experienced panic attacks, I remember that point in my life when I didn't have answers to my questions about how can I heal, and I didn't really at that point I really didn't know, and
Mhm.
I was starting to understand. Like I started to study like neuroplasticity and how pain works and all of that, but it was just still like the very beginning of that journey, and it felt, it felt so heavy and so just like this tidal wave that I started like try to fight, and always lost that fight against that tidal wave of the panic attack coming on. And it definitely was a process of creating space between the, like, this is something that I talk about with everything, is like when you have the stimulus, you have that emotion, that feeling that is causing the loop of thoughts that is
Mhm.
then spiraling you into this panic attack experience in your body, is that you can create that space between the stimulus or the trigger and then your thought processes.
Mhm.
But at that moment, like when I was in the midst of it, it was awful,
Yeah.
and it felt so crushing. And I'm getting emotional now thinking about it, like how helpless you feel in that
Mhm.
moment. And that's also why I want to talk about these things, because I know the transformative power of committing to the work of creating that space between the trigger and your response, which is like, again, like I said, it relates to
Yeah.
everything. And yeah, just wanted to say, like, it's huge when you understand that you don't have to assimilate to your thoughts. You don't have to believe
Mm.
your thoughts. You don't have to take on your thoughts as if they are your identity and your biology.
Exactly. Mhm.
So yeah, that's something I really want everyone listening to remember, that whether they are in the midst of it right now and it feels crushing or feels like too much, there is always hope. And we can, by committing to the work and by being surrounded by supporting people and influences and whatnot, like mentors or whatever it is, therapy, I don't know, podcasts,
Mhm.
we can get there. We can create that space.
Absolutely. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I had, from a fairly young age, I was suicidal when I was a young teenager, like pretty severely. I had some attempts, nobody knew about them, because I didn't really have anyone to talk to. Um, I was diagnosed with ADHD initially. Then it was anxiety and depression, and then I found a psychiatrist that was really wonderful, and he diagnosed me with a type of bipolar disorder, which is depression and anxiety cycling back and forth, and like it was debilitating. And I tried various medications at various points in my life. I think at one point with this last psychiatrist, it was helpful because it sort of, and this is also before I found any of this kind of work and philosophy and approaches. It was definitely helpful. It was helpful after I had my two kids, because I had like severe postpartum depression the first time. And that was prevented with medication the second time. But those are gone now. Like, and it's not from medication, it's from this other sort of understanding, kind of a different relationship with myself, understanding what my thoughts mean and don't mean, what my feelings mean and don't mean, not being afraid of those things. The last time I saw my psychiatrist, he was just like, what? Like, what is going on? How did this happen? And I didn't necessarily have, I couldn't explain it to him. He's very like traditional medicine approach. He's fantastic for what he does. But like, it's like, it's not that I never have those thoughts anymore. They just don't bother me the way that they used to. And because I don't give them attention, which is food for them, then they don't come as often.
Exactly. It's the exact same thing with healing from neuropathic pain.
Yes.
Is that
Yep.
when you give the
Exactly.
attention to it and you feed the loop of fear, which is the symptom loop, is the fear, actually. It's that's where it comes from, or what keeps it going. So for me also, like, I've healed from the pain, but yes, sure, sometimes it comes on if I'm super stressed out, or if there's just a lot going on. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, so those neural pathways may be firing up, but I'm not panicking. I'm not like, oh gosh, now it begins, now it's over, now, like, now I can't do anything. Like, I don't have that helplessness or that fear or that attachment to what I'm observing. Rather, I can create detachment from it and then change direction with my thoughts. So yeah, love that
And
you mentioned that.
it's interesting too. So when you say detachment, that's definitely how I describe it. But then I also had this thought, like, as you're talking, it's detachment and it's also presence too. Like,
Yeah.
just like what we were talking about. So detachment doesn't mean like, okay, I'm just going to ignore it, totally ignore it, because that doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't.
That's like, trying to, like, beat a wave that's crashing into you by just
Exactly.
standing there. Like, that
Exactly.
won't stop it. You feel it more intensely. But it's presence to yourself is, so, and that can help with, it's like creates this distance from it in a way, where it's
Yes,
like your true
distancing.
self
Yeah.
then is observing it, a disidentification with it
Mm.
also. I mean, I would use the word disassociation, but it's a tricky word because in psychology it means something not great.
Yeah, 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 I was thinking
But
that
that
too.
is, you're not identifying with this thing. And so, like, during a panic attack, during childbirth, during things like that, have kind of what we think of as bad feelings. One of the biggest keys is actually dropping into your body. Like, oh, like, well, how does this actually feel? Oh, I noticed this, like, the panic attack, it's like this sharp pain for me. When I would get them, it was like either by my rib, by my heart, or by my appendix. And then I would, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack or appendicitis, but like, really just letting go of those things and just being present to the actual sensations. Is it's amazing what that, like, how helpful that can be.
Exactly. Yeah. So true. If someone is not listening and going through something like this, either they're in the midst of having regular panic attacks, or they have pain or whatever it may be, what are some, like, practices that you would advise them to go into? Like, one of the hypnosis things that we did together, I would love for you to walk us through that, because I think that is so useful and kind of simple but powerful also. So if you remember what I was referring to, like
Yes.
the hypnosis thing, that I would love for you to walk us through that.
Sure. Well, and I can also maybe just say kind of really quickly, because sometimes I think when people hear the word hypnosis, it's like, wow, what is that? What I hear a lot too is like, well, that doesn't work on me. And hypnosis is something that we do. I actually I tend to refer to it lately more as self-hypnosis. We do it all day long, all the time. Like, that's just part of, like, being human. It's a thing that everyone does, especially people who have things like chronic pain that's not, it doesn't have a structural cause, or panic attacks or anxiety or whatever. That comes from self-hypnosis. In a way, it's just sort of patterns of thinking. That's a simple way to think about it. And then that causes this cascade of experience. Like, the thoughts cause emotions, which can then, kind of feed back into itself. And hypnosis is a way of intentionally doing this thing that we do all the time. So, like, hypnosis happens if you go to a movie or watch a movie and you get really absorbed in the movie, and you might even forget where you are. And you might even have feelings, like if you cry, during something that happens in the movie, or maybe it's like a horror movie and you're really terrified. And you feel that. You don't just think, oh, that's scary. Like, you feel it. That is hypnosis. That's the result of self-hypnosis. And so we can use that same process intentionally, instead of just like it happening to us and we don't even know what's going on. We can use it intentionally. And so the thing that I walked you through is a practice that's really useful for something that's happening in the moment in your body, that that for whatever reason you're not into that experience. Like, it could be a migraine, it could be like severe stomach pain, it could be like all kinds of things. It could be anxiety, it could be a panic attack, anything that's felt in the body. So the first part of it, the first step, is to notice notice what's happening in your body. Where is it in your body? So like if I don't know, sometimes when I have anxiety, actually I have like a tiny little bit right now. I've had it for the past couple of days, and it's like fluttering in my chest. I feel it a little bit in my stomach, and then I just feel this sort of like fluttering, not awesome feeling, like stuff in my chest. And I'm not going to get fully into it right now, because it, sometimes it takes a few minutes. But so is really either saying out loud or really thinking about where is it in my body, and even describing it. It's like this fluttering, it feels heavy on this part, and this other part feels like it's going to flip around. Just weird stuff, like it doesn't have to make sense, but really trying to describe the sensations, the feeling in the body. A panic attack might include and I even feel on the edge of it, not a panic attack, but like my breathing, like sometimes people tend to like breathe more shallowly and quickly. So noticing all of that. And then take a deep breath, because I'm really like aware of it now. See, before I wasn't even aware of it. But it was here the whole time. I was just sort of aware that like, oh yeah, I guess I'm a little bit anxious. So you drop into your body, you notice the feeling, and then you come up with a metaphor for the feeling. And so, it might be easy for some people. Metaphors just come very quickly and easily. Like, I don't know, it's like a ship tossing on the water in a storm, or I don't know, something like that. A really helpful little hack for coming up with a metaphor is thinking about if it was a cartoon, especially like the old fashioned ones like Bugs Bunny or Roadrunner, that had a lot of physical, like if somebody's finger got, hit with a hammer, the finger would get like bigger than the person, and throb and whatever. So if it was a cartoon, this sensation in my body, what would it be like? And then you sort of thinking about that, imagining that. And then what you imagine is, what would it take for that to change? And that might come right away. You might need to sort of just sit with that for a minute. Here's where cartoon land can help again. So if I'm thinking of like a big thumb, somebody hit my thumb and now it's like really big and throbbing, like the first thing that comes to me is like, oh, like it would help to have like a big thing of ice kind of like enveloping it, but like crunchy ice, not a hard ice cube, but like crunchy, broken up ice, and like just almost like a finger glove of ice, surrounding my finger. And then it helps it cool down. And then now it's constricting to get my finger back to the regular size in cartoon. Like just sometimes really random things, come to your mind. So you come up with that, and then you imagine it happening. And this is what hypnosis is. It's not just saying, like right now, I just said it to you, but and that came from, my conscious mind. But the imagining it is like full body, full self. So now the imagining part, I would actually sit there and I would like close my eyes probably, and like imagine this happening like out in the world where my finger is. And it's the ice is coming and it's doing it. And I imagine the sensations of what it would actually feel like if there was ice around my finger. and I imagine it, like feel it getting smaller in my imagination. That's actually what hypnosis is. There's many ways to get around to it and many techniques and approaches, but it's this sort of like full self internal, it's not just a visualization, it's an imagination, with your mind. Maybe you hear things, you imagine the sensations,
Right.
and
So you're engaging all of your senses
all
in
of your
that.
senses, but in your mind, in your
Mm.
imagination.
Yeah.
And like it's crazy how magical this is. Like, I know it's not magic, it's neuroscience. I could explain it all in terms of, neural pathways and whatever. But it's, I mean, people have cured, like all kinds of chronic physical and psychological conditions with this process. And so you might do it once and maybe that's enough for it to work. It's pretty much always, I think I've seen it be enough to do something,
Right.
to bring relief. And then you can, check in with yourself again. Okay, like what's it feeling like now? What do I notice now? And then you see, you might get a new thing pop up, or it might be enough, and you feel good. But if there's something else, you can go through the process again with that new sensation.
Yeah.
And this takes minutes. I mean, you can kind of like play with it longer if you want to. Especially, I think now I'm remembering. Oh, and see, it's funny. Like I have like a full body memory of you were imagining like being in a spa, I think, or something
Yes,
like
I
that.
was. Yeah, warm
And
water.
like you were really, yeah. And like I even remember because of how you were describing it, I was imagining it too. And I actually just now got like a body sensation of like, oh, that's nice. Like, so hang out there for a while if you want to, because it's not, this is like the most important thing. I think it's not just imagining, that is creating a new experience in your mind, which is creating new neural pathways. And that is change. And that actually can happen much more quickly than if you had to do it out there in the real world.
Yeah.
Because your mind is in full control of what you're imagining. You can create any experience for yourself.
Yeah.
Just like a, like a musician or a diver or a soccer player or an orator, like they literally, and there's been like science studies about this. They literally create change in their brain by visualizing things. Like if I'm about to give a performance, play a piano concerto, I can actually practice in my mind. And it's not just like, oh, I was just imagining this pretty little thing. Like there are brain changes that happen there. So, and we can do that with anything. The problem is we're usually doing it with things that feel like crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're thinking about all the terrible things. And what if this? And oh my God, what if that? Or that was so bad. And so we can use the same process that we naturally know how to do from the minute we're born, probably before that.
Yeah, exactly.
To feel
And
better.
I think it's so, so cool that we have this capacity within ourselves. And I'm so, so sad that so many people are not aware of this. And I find it so funny. I heard someone say, I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was a podcast or something, but someone said that if you are capable of worrying, you are capable of visualizing. Because some people
Absolutely.
are like, well,
Yep.
I'm not visual, I can't do that, or it's
Mhm.
very hard for me to visualize things or imagine things. Well,
Mhm.
if you are capable of worrying, you are you're literally
Absolutely.
capable of doing it, but you're doing it the other way around. You're going towards what you don't want rather
Mhm.
than where you want to go.
And you don't have to see. So that's, the term visualizing, like I think of it that way because I'm very visual, but the word imagining maybe is a little bit more neutral because some people really can't visualize, like some people actually can't. And for some people, it's just not their top kind of way of imagining.
Right.
But it doesn't matter what it is. It's just which one do you do? Like which one do you do to get worry or anxiety or whatever, and then use that
Mm,
um,
yeah.
to create what you want to create.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is like part of the answer that I wrote the question, like if someone is stuck and aware of their limiting beliefs and doesn't know how to move forward, would you say that they can use this technique to create experiences on a daily basis that are getting them out of the limiting beliefs?
Absolutely. So limiting beliefs are, I mean, in a way, they're also just a thought habit with a certain kind of like origin or seed. And if you know what that one is, and here's the key though, none of this stuff works if you don't really want the thing on the other side. The root of it is what you actually want. And it's amazing how, I mean, me too, I fall into this trap too. It's amazing how disconnected from that we are so much of the time. Most people are, in a way, like we don't really, I mean, sometimes it's painful to let yourself connect with what you want because it might be very different from some key aspects in your life and people aren't ready for that. But the first part of it is, so you have a limiting belief, you know about it. And I guess you must not want it, right? It's creating some sort of suffering or issue or procrastination, or, you're not getting promoted, or who knows what, commitment issue. And you want to change that. So the key is you really have to want it. And sometimes that's like, oh yeah, of course I do. Sometimes there might be a process to get there. And then getting very clear on what you do actually want instead. What is the thing you want? So with a limiting belief, what do you want to believe instead?
Right.
And like really, like you really have to connect. This is also hypnosis. You have to connect with the wanting. It's not just like up here kind of conscious awareness or intellectual wanting, although that's a step. But like, I really want, like, I don't know, one that I came across for myself recently was like that. I mean, there's a lot of money stuff that I've dealt with, but there's still more that keeps on coming. It just keeps on coming. And I realized that like how cheap I am in certain ways. And so the new belief that I came up with is I love spending money. Okay, wait, yeah, and I'm still like, oh God, like I'm not there yet with really loving spending money, but I really want to believe that. Like that I can connect with. I don't believe the statement, but I definitely can connect with wanting to believe that.
So it's a
Because
full
I can
body yes.
Full body yes. And again, the key is you don't have to believe the thing yet. Because that doesn't, like, but you do need to connect with wanting to believe it.
I think that's so powerful. Is there other like very often people are like, I can't, like, I don't believe that, like it's so hard for me to believe that. So that's why a lot of people don't ever then commit
Yeah.
to the work of affirming new beliefs and the journey of creating new beliefs, because it's so hard to believe the belief yet. But that's okay. Like you don't have
That's
to.
okay. And the more
Yeah.
like you try to fight that, like that just kind of creates more resistance. It doesn't really work. And if it works, some people will say, well, yes, of course that works. Like if it worked on the other end, that's not why it worked. Something else happened that made it work.
Right.
So that's the key, is wanting to believe it. If that's all you can connect with, awesome. And then what you can do is visualize or imagine, almost like, okay, well, I don't believe it yet. I definitely don't believe that, like, I love spending money. God, it's so funny. Every time I say it, I have this like body reaction, which is also something I could work with too. I could notice that body reaction and really get into that every time I say that the trigger, which is I love spending money. God, it happens every time. So I don't believe it yet. And I know I don't believe it because I have this reaction in my body that's sort of proof like I'm not there yet. But what would it be like to believe it? Could I imagine totally accepting, I don't believe it, I'm not there yet. But what if I did? Like, what if I could pretend that there's a version of me? Like, what if I was someone who did believe that? Then what would it be like? And this is an interesting exercise because all kinds of stuff could come up then, like for me, it actually did. Like the first thing I think is like, Well, if I just love spending money, then I would just be like one of these wasteful people that just buys and buys and buys and like doesn't care about anything or anybody. So like that's interesting.
Mm,
So you keep going through this stuff because a lot of that stuff will come up and you examine it. Well, do I really think that's true? Like, no, I don't think that's true, because I know of someone else, my really good friend's mother, stepmother, she loves spending money, but she's one of the most kind, and like, I mean, not frugal, but like intentional people that I've ever met. She's not wasteful. She's not like, I mean, she's wealthy, but she doesn't go around,
yeah. Yeah.
acting in these whatever ways that I assume those people act like.
Right.
So I can imagine her. Okay, like, well, what would it be like if I love spending money and I'm like her? And like
Mm,
almost like trying that on, imagining yourself. It's imagining your future self. Just trying it on.
yeah.
It's almost like acting in a way, sort of. It's these
Mm,
little bits of imagining or visualizing. What would it be like to believe that? Like, what if I really, truly, I was already there? I already believed that I love spending money. Like, how, and it felt good. Like, how would my life be then? What would I think? How would I act?
exactly. So powerful. Those are just incredible processes, and these have changed many experiences in my life, like totally. So I'm just so excited to have these conversations because I just want everyone to experience the transformation. Like I'm not
Mhm.
satisfied with just us two knowing these
I
secrets. So
know. Everyone needs to know. And this is like one of the biggest, I think probably some of the biggest things. Like I keep track of these big things like that I want to teach my kids. If I could only teach you one page worth of stuff, one of them is like, don't be afraid of your thoughts and feelings. Um, and this other one is like sort of this idea of living from your future self, which is not about, well, I'm bad now and my future self is better. It's, we already are that. Like we can create anything that we want right now in this moment. So if you want to be someone who, like has a certain job or whatever your goals are, like we think that those things need to happen in order for us to feel like that person. That's
right,
like the biggest misunderstanding. We
right,
actually need to be that person in order for those things to happen.
exactly.
That's where the creation comes from. And so things like limiting beliefs, or like, I want to be someone without panic attacks. Like that's one thing that that a person might want to be. Really imagine that person and like feel what it's like to be that person.
Right.
And then like you actually then become that person. And
So
it
true.
doesn't
So
take
cool.
years and years of training and practice and like analysis or whatever. Like it happens very quickly if you
Yeah.
practice this in your mind, in your
Yeah.
imagination mind or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. In your
Exactly.
imaginings. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, these
Yeah.
are so cool. I could talk to you for hours, literally. It's so cool to have you here, and I just we have to wrap it up.
Mhm. It was so
Unfortunately,
fun.
but we have to do a round two at some point because like I
Absolutely.
said, I could go on and on and on. But before you go, please let us know where we can find you online.
Sure. At annakolak.com. So ANNAKOLAK.com. You can get
Yes.
in touch with me there.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Like
you. It
like I
was so
said,
fun.
the first time around it was a gift, and again, like your presence here has been a gift, and I'm just so appreciative of your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you. This was really fun. Can't wait to chat again.
Me neither.